Okay, this is our daily study of Pirkei Avot, the Mishnah Ethics of the Fathers, for those who have yard site for tonight, the 18th of Sivan. Dorothy Blonsky, Morris Kaplan, Morris Feingold, Milton Glass, Gertrude Klinnock, David Seltzer, and Stephen White. May their memory be for a blessing. A link to the text of the Mishnah will be in the first comment below. Chapter 3, Mishnah 13. Rabbi Akiva Omer, the great Rabbi Akiva, one of the more famous of our sages. Rabbi Akiva says, Schok v'kalus rosh margilin la'erva, masora siog la Torah, maestros siog la osher, nedarim siog la prishus, siog la chachma shasika. So Rabbi Akiva has a list of 5 items. There's sort of pattern of numbers. Rabbis likes to give their sayings in 3s or 4s or 5s. We've kind of been seeing a lot of that so far. Well, the first of these 5 is something that leads to something bad, and the other 4 are good things that act as a safeguard against a safeguard in order to lead to something good. So let's see how that plays out. The first item is jesting and lightheadedness accustom a man to lewdness, right? So if you're overly flirty, it's kind of self-explanatory. If a man flirts too much with women, it could lead to lewdness. Okay, but then there's 4 things that are a safeguard in a good way. Tradition is a fence to the Torah. So we, as rabbinic Jews, are all about tradition. You can invoke the Fiddler on the Roof in your mind right now. Tradition. So, right, art imitates life, and we really are very into tradition. And what tradition means is we don't just have the written Torah, because it's actually Shakespeare who said, even the devil can quote scripture. The written Torah can, and we Jews had the wisdom to realize this early on. Even the written Torah can mean anything that you want to manipulate the text to mean it, to want it to mean. We're lucky to have thousands of years of precedent and case law and discussion that restrict our understanding of what the text means. But the beauty is we don't have, it's not restricted to one interpretation. There's hundreds of interpretations. The rabbis say, Shivim panim laTorah, there are 70 faces to the Torah. But I like to say, but there aren't 75, right? There's a near infinite legitimate ways to understand the Torah. Certain things are objectively out of bounds. But the point is, our tradition provides that structure that puts a fence around how to understand the Torah and enriches our understanding. You can't understand the written Torah without that system of the tradition. Okay. Then we have Masrot Siog LaTorah, tithing. Tithes are a fence to wealth. So tithing is, in biblical times, you gave 10% of your crop to those who are needy. Nowadays, a tradition arose that you should ideally give 10% of your money. It's not, the rabbis say that's not strictly obligatory. You're supposed to give some amount of tzedakah. 10% is sort of recommended based on the biblical idea of tithing crops. When you're dealing with money, which isn't crops, and you're not a farmer, it's not considered strictly obligatory, but it's considered to be an ideal to strive for. But the point is, you might ask, if I give 10% of my money, and how am I going to have enough for myself? And 10%, there's a whole discussion that's what I mentioned of our 2,000 years of precedent and case law. There's a whole discussion in our literature of 10% of what? Is it gross or net? Or what just like taxes, what can you deduct, from that amount of how much is it just the liquid assets that you have left over after everything else? There's a lot of legitimate ways to calculate 10% of what. But anyway, in case you should say, and a lot of Christians do this also, right? Tithing of their money. But in case you should say, how will I have enough for myself? Amazingly, this is one of the only things where God himself gives a guarantee in the Torah. He says, test me on this. And the prophet Malachi says explicitly, test me if I will not open to you the windows of heaven and pour for you a blessing that there will be more than is sufficient. Meaning, if you give charity, God promises you will not go poor from giving charity. In honor of the mitzvah you're doing, you will have enough. And that's not guaranteed if you're foolish and give away 90% of your money and you can't afford to. 10% is the amount. God promises if you give away 10%, however you calculate that 10%, I promise you won't go poor in merit of that mitzvah. The other thing that God gives a guarantee on in the Torah is Shemitah, the sabbatical year. If you're a farmer in the land of Israel, you let your land lie fallow for the 7th year. And if, in case you should say, how will I have enough to eat? God guarantees, don't worry, if you're pious and you keep the sabbatical year and you save, and you're smart, and you have to put in your own efforts too and save up enough in the previous 6, I guarantee you won't go hungry, you will have enough. It's a bit of a different question to what extent the sabbatical year might be operative nowadays. Without a temple and without the whole system of biblical law in place, but that's for a different discussion. Okay. Then we have vows are offense to abstinence. So if you want to abstain from something, it's a good idea to make a vow about it. We don't really do this much anymore, but pious Jews used to make a neder all the time. And even nowadays, when you make a commitment, I'll see you tomorrow at noon. Pious Jews will say bli neder without making a vow, because we take. I'll see you at noon tomorrow, bli neder, but I'm not making a vow because vows have incredible force. But it used to be recommended, hey, if you're having a problem with alcohol, then take a vow to God. I hereby vow not to drink alcohol for the next year. Or if you're having a problem dieting, I hereby vow not to have cake, for the next 3 months, and I'm going to make a vow to God, and that'll be a way to keep your abstinence. However, we know that Jews also had incredible trepidation about vows, because what's the holiest, most famous night of the year? Kol Nidre. What does Kol Nidre mean? Yom Kippur night, where we stand before God in trepidation and say, "Hey, all those vows I made this entire year, oh my God, I don't think I kept to them. Those resolutions, please annul them." So we see there's a fine dance in vows. That this Mishnah is saying you might want to try it, but Kol Nidre seems to indicate a lot of people couldn't keep their vows, so maybe it's a better idea not to try vows. And of course, there's a whole literature about that, but it's kind of fallen out of practice. We don't really take vows so much anymore. And then finally, siag lachachma shtika, offense to wisdom is silence. And that's how he ends. And this is a value that's really lost in our day and age where people have to talk all the time. The famous English saying is better to be silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and confirm that you are, right? Some version of that variously attributed, I saw online, to either Mark Twain or Abraham Lincoln. No one really knows. It's based on the book of Proverbs in the Tanakh, in the Bible, which says sort of something similar things in many places. But this is an old-fashioned value. And you think of nowadays of Twitter, everyone has to make themselves known at all times. Well, this is something that people should be, and especially now in the political climate, people post all sorts of inflammatory, angry things, and perhaps people should be taught this. The greatest sign of wisdom is silence. Now, like everything, there's always on the one hand, on the other hand, because you could also say that silence is complicity, right? When something is important in going on society and you just want to keep silent about it and you don't speak out, there is an ethical imperative also to speak out. So clearly there's a balance there. But it could be that the default is, well, really, really consider carefully your words and if this needs to be heard and the way that you're wording it, and is this going to bring more good and peace to the world? Okay, so with that, we'll say the Malay. El Malay Rachamim Shochein Bamiromim Hamitzei Menucha Nechona Al Kanfei Hashechina B'malos Kedoshim Mitorim Yizor Harakia Masirim Es Nishmos Kolas Karos Shel Halayla Shalchu Li Olamam Ba'avur Shemispalim Bad Haskaras Nishmasam Began Eden Tehei Menuchasam Lachein Bal Harachamim Yastireim B'Seiser Kenafav Li Olamim Yitzror B'Tzor Chaim Es Nishmasam Adonai hu nachlasam yanuchu b'shalom mishkavasam and Amar Amen. And in English, O God, full of mercy, who dwells on high, grant proper rest on the wings of the divine presence and the lofty levels of the holy and pure, who shine like the glow of the firmament. For the souls of Dorothy Blonsky, Morris Kaplan, Morris Feingold, Milton Glass, Gertrude Klinnock, David Seltzer, and Stephen White, in whose memory we study and pray. May their resting place be in the Garden of Eden. Therefore, may the Master of Mercy shelter them in the shelter of his wings for eternity. May he bind their soul in the bond of life. Hashem is their heritage. May they rest in peace. And let us say Amen.